Is it live? It is live. Yay, it is live. Hello there. Hi, good people. Jason here at Green Country Agriforestry. Oh, good evening. January 15th. What a day. Give me a second to get comfortable here. Boy, I'm sorry if I'm a little bit late getting started. Hi, Vicky. Hello, everybody. My apologies for being tardy. This seems to be my modus operandi these days, is running a little bit behind, huh? I was just getting myself a little bit of coffee together. And while I was in there making some coffee, I happened to notice this little knickknack. We've been going over the bookshelf and going through the bookshelf to get rid of some of the things that are just sort of fluff fiction on the shelf. Had the kind of idea that the world suddenly and drastically changed, and we needed to rely upon the books on our bookshelves for wisdom. There was quite a bit on my shelf that was just consumer fiction, right? Nothing really worth paying any attention to. So we've been going through all of that and trying to pare it down to useful books. And if they are going to be a fiction, at least they should be good fiction, or fiction that passes on some sort of a message or insight. Let's see, Vicky is saying, hope you're having better weather than we are here in Arkansas. Oh my goodness, wishing I had a wood to eat because I have plenty of wood. Yeah, you got plenty of wood out there in the forest. It's a good place to be, incidentally, in the forest, surrounded by the trees. They provide you with everything you need. You have the right kind of trees. So tonight, hello there. I see we have some people coming in finally. I'm doing the Mr. Rogers neighborhood thing and getting my shoes off. You may notice the studio space is a little different. Well, it's not a studio; it's my living room. The studio space is just a little bit different than it has been in the past. Let me do a little. Turn this thing on here. Get this microphone. Pardon me a second. All right, testing 1 2 3, testing 1 2 3. Can you guys hear that? Okay. Let me double check. I'm going to go here to audio. Yep. Okay. It says it's working. All righty. All right. So I got my supplemental microphone on there. It's going to scoot up just a little bit here. There we go. Okay. I want to be close enough that I can read the screen, but far enough that I'm not all up in your face. All right, here. So I wrote a story, and it is. I have to start out by telling you my apologies. I'm going to have to lie to you. as much as I like. As much as I like and treasure the seeking of truth, I have to begin by saying that I'm lying to you, because I can never relate anything exactly 100% true. And this is especially true whenever I'm going to be sharing things like myths and stories and legends and things like that. They're not going to be true. They're lies, but because they're lies and you know they're lies, you can understand that there's truth within them. Look at the whole picture and extract whatever wisdom that you want. It's said that a person that has wisdom can extract wisdom from the mouths of fools. So I'm going to be engaging it in a little bit of foolishness in the hopes that maybe something will pass on to all of you. All right. Let me see here. Got Brian in here. We got sleeping on the floor. Yeah. Well, it's good for my back. Most of the time. makes everything nice and straight. Yeah. Mary doesn't like the mattress as firm as I like it. So whenever Mary's home, we will, not all the time, but sometimes she'll come out and sleep on the floor with me. She doesn't have to. I can get up and go and use the bed. Boy, I just like it. Anyway, so I found this little knickknack over there and was washing it off and contemplating all the stuff that we've got in the way of books that we still have to get sorted out. Mary went through some of the other shelves back over there, and she picked out a few books that she thought were worth keeping, and now I have to go through the entire mess. I don't know what I should do. Should I separate them out into analytical on one side and intuitive on the other, and sort of make the bookshelves balance like the hemispheres of the mind? Would that be interesting? Or do we just stick with the bookshelf that the book goes on, and the shelf specifically that the book goes on are going to be more of a function of how big the book itself is, and not necessarily how useful the book is? We have all kinds of odd things here and there, but today I'm going to share a story that we culturally appropriated. Let me scoot up a bit because I cannot read this. Wait. At least not from where I was at. Okay. You guys notice there's a link over there in chat, if you can see chat, for the website where I have this particular story. Vicky said, if I recall correct, the court fool is the only one that dared speak unvarnished truth. Well, yeah, I try to get there, but unfortunately, I discovered, because I see the world differently than everybody else. We all have our own little space around this globe, and because whenever we look up at the sky, the place that we look up from is going to look a little bit different from everybody else's. So whenever we go to describe the truth of what it is that we see, our truth is going to be just a little bit different from everybody else's, out of necessity, simply because that's the way the system is designed. But because it's designed that way, we have the opportunity to see truth in 360 degrees, if we can accept the fact that we don't all see everything. Anyway, so I started the story out here, and I'm just going to read what I wrote. The important thing to know about stories is their proper use and purpose. Proper purpose of our, oh my goodness, I can't even read from here. The proper use of our star stories. I swear I wrote this. I wrote this, I can't read it. The proper use of our star stories is to tell us something about time, about either an event that occurred or at a particular time, or an annual event to be mindful of. The tale that follows is not a cultural myth of any particular nation or even one continent, but an amalgamation of many stories that regard the constellation known as the Pleiades, and how the time of their departure, which is about April 15th, is significant to living with the land here in Oklahoma. I should also point out that this is a bottle gourd story, and it's best told while preparing dried gourds for use as containers, which we're going to be doing tonight. And whenever I did this the last time, I used a set of 7 seashells with the story, but unfortunately I don't live next to the ocean anymore. The seashells, after being used a few times, did shatter, and I don't have them anymore. So I'm going to have to use a substitute that folks that are further inland have to resort to. And that is, of course, rocks. So not this rock. This is just a piece of carved quartz. The rocks we're going to use over here. I'm going to get some tools together. Get a few odds and ends. A knife, some glue. Oh, my apologies. You could use hide glue. Yeah, my clock's not accurate. But we don't have any, so I'm going to use regular white glue. So I just have some regular gravel here, regular small rocks, hopefully with sharp enough edges that whenever we put them inside of a bottle gourd, it'll help scrape out the insides. Okay. But I would ordinarily use shells for the telling of the story, but we're not on the East Coast. We're not in southwestern North Carolina and in traditional Cherokee lands, so we're not telling the story in anywhere close to where it might have been told once upon a time. So just make allowances. Speaking of once upon a time, here we go. Now, once upon a time, long before I was a young person, which was a very long time indeed. There were 7 sisters who lived in the sky, and they were always together. Where one sister went, the others were bound to go. There was also a great giant who lived in the sky, and he kept a flock of beautiful white birds. Once the sisters snuck into the giant's lair and took the white feathers to make cloaks for themselves. The giant found out about the theft and quickly began to chase after the girls. And you can see 6 of those 7 sisters in the sky today, wearing their white cloaks, and following behind them, there's the giant. That would be the 6 stars of the Pleiades, and then right behind them, chasing after them, is Orion. Now, what happened to the 7th sister is one of the oldest stories I know. It involves a young human by the name of Ihia, which is the name that he has after the river cane that grew by his home. Of course, one can't run all the time. So when the sisters grew tired of running for a while, they would come down to the ground and dance across the ponds, lakes, and rivers and streams, freezing them solid. It's very cold high up in the sky, and that's why the sisters make everything freeze. They're made of ice. Just a little secret about that. Sometimes the sisters dancing will stir up the waters and make great clouds across the sky so that they can rest without the giant seeing them. So whenever the clouds are up there, the giant, he's looking down, and they're down here on the ground, but they've made the clouds, the giant can't see them, so they can rest. They have to always run. So they come down to earth so they can take a rest. On these occasions, they rest all across the landscape, on ponds and lakes, on rocks and trees, and even on the roofs of our homes. Some of you out there right now could probably see evidence of those sisters with their white cloaks laying all over the landscape right now. They stopped by to visit us here a couple of days ago, but the snow is almost melted. So there's that. Arnold is checking in with the number 8. Hi, Arnold. Let me see here. One evening, the sky had cleared early, despite the maiden's efforts, and the moon was shining brightly overhead. A young man, who we already have identified, his name was Ihia, ventured out to have a look at all the brilliant whiteness reflecting the moonlight, and that's when he saw her. Now, I know that some of you are reading or hearing this story, and you may not believe that such a thing can happen yet, but in time, I'm sure you will. You see that special someone in the moonlight, and you see that special someone in the moonlight, and your entire world changes forever. And so it was with this young man. As he gazed upon the youngest of the sisters, he fell completely head over heels in love. Now, everyone here is relatively intelligent, so I don't have to tell you that one should always take care when walking in the woods after a snowfall. Aside from the pits and holes waiting to catch legs and break them, ouch, stepping on a branch is liable to produce a very audible crack, alerting everyone in the neighborhood to your presence. Ihia was an intelligent sort, but he was so completely captivated by what he saw that he neglected that particular moment to care and stepped upon a branch. Now, sound carries so much better in the cold weather, as you and I both know all too well. And the maiden heard the noise and looked to see the source, finding our hero. Now, Ihia stood perfectly still, uncertain what to do. The maiden simply smiled at him and disappeared, going back into the sky again as the sun rose. Determined to be with the sky maiden, he had decided to seize her the very next time he laid eyes upon her and bring her back to his home. So he waited, and the very next year he had his chance. Now would probably be a good time to mention that there is such a thing as respecting personal boundaries, and grabbing someone and dragging them back to your home is considered to be a violation by most. As I say, he saw his chance to bring the Star Maiden home, and he took her up in his arms and brought her back to his lodge. I'm going to tell you what happened next. But before that, let's go ahead and get started on working on one of these bottle gourds. I have a technique here for preparing a bottle gourd that will enable you to use it for the preservation of your harvest, if that's what you want to do. We want to work with this one. This is a good size one. Yeah. You can use it for preserving your corn. You can use it for preserving your beans. You can put your knickknacks in it. You can do all kinds of things with bottle gourds if you preserve them properly. All right. The process starts out whenever the gourd comes off of the vine. Whenever it's done, when it's reached that point, you go ahead and harvest it. You take it inside, and what I like to do, since it's usually about that time of the year anyway, is put them right down there next to our wood stove. So we have this really dry, arid area around the wood stove. It's warm and the air gets dry, and that usually lets them dry out pretty well without getting too incredibly nasty. There's a few spots on this one, but I think that we'll be just fine. Now, get rid of the spots I've got. Well, I've got this little piece of Scotch-Brite. I'm just going to use the Scotch-Brite all over the outside of the gourd to kind of knock off any old dead stuff that's on the outside of it. If you didn't have Scotch-Brite, you'd probably want to use tough grasses, maybe some sand. And the idea is just to get off any organic gunk that might still be left on there. There is a good hard surface underneath. We just want to expose that. There's a little bit of this skin material still here, if you can see it. All right. Now, I'm sorry to say, I do not know what the star maiden's name was. I know. There are some people who do, but I'm not one of those people. But today, we call that star Cleona. The maiden went with him willingly, of course, and gave a gift of 6 white bulbs, one for each of her sisters, because where one sister went, all the sisters would go, and she went into the lodge to stay with Ihia. Only at this point did Ihia discover that the maiden was made of only ice, and when he tried to hold her, she melted away in his arms, leaving behind the 6 white bulbs. Ihia planted those bulbs by his door, and from them grew all of the garlic, the leeks, the shallots, scallions, onions, and chives. So all of the allium family of plants sprouted up that you can find still growing wild all over the world, and particularly in North America, there are several different varieties that you can find from the allium tricorn over there in Appalachia, which is our wild leek or ramps, to the bear garlic that you find in the West, or the ordinary wild garlic that you see growing all over the place here across the plains and in other places. I believe the Ozarks has quite a bit of that wild garlic as well. Field garlic or wild onions. There are several different varieties. In any case, all of those sprouted up next to the door of his lodge. Now, he was even more determined after this to take the Star Maiden to be his wife. She escaped from him, but he's determined. He's gonna try again. So he's got another year that goes by. Over the course of this year, he thought about how he would go about it. He's got the Star Maiden, who's only made out of ice. So if he wants to keep her, he has to make a place where she can be kept. So he spent the year digging a deep pit into the side of the hill, and he built a timber frame within it, made out of shipmast locust. That's kind of like the black locust that we sell here. If you go to greencountryagroforestry.com and have a look, I think we have 2, maybe 3 black locusts that we can sell and ship. 4 sold out. We have a couple left, but he made the timber frame out of those locust timbers because he knew that the locust wood was going to resist rotting away for a long time, and he wanted to live a long and happy life with the Star Maiden. So he wanted to make sure that the home that he built for her was secure and would last for a good long time. So he roofed that entire frame with locust wood, and then he went down to the ocean, as was the custom every year, to catch fish and gather sea salt. Now, before leaving the river where he lived, he cut several lengths of river cane, and made a basket. Remember, Ihia is the name for the river cane that grew near his home, and that, of course, is his name too. So combing the beach with the basket in hand, he picked up 7 white seashells. Now, unfortunately, I was not able to go down to the ocean because Cherokee got relocated to Oklahoma, and the ocean's nowhere close. So we're just going to have to make do with some rocks for now. They'll work. All right. So he went down there and he found 7 white seashells, one for each of the 7 sisters, and put those in the basket. Now, although I've heard it said that it was 7 mounds of seashells, one for each maiden, but there's another version of the story. See, there were at once 7 clans among the Cherokee, so 7 mounds of shells might mean that 7 different clan gatherings left 7 mounds of shells. So it's open to some interpretation. On the beach, he found balls of black sticky stuff, tar, and he put those in this basket too. All right, so he has got all kinds of stuff from going down to the ocean. He's got salt. He's got seashells. Of course, he's got fish that he caught while he was out there. He's got tar and all other kinds of wonderful things that you can find down by the ocean. Whenever you go there in the summer, and it's the appropriate time to be down by the ocean, and there aren't hurricanes. Upon returning home, he began, is this too loud? Upon returning home, he began sealing the joints between the timbers with tar, and then clay, and then stone, and then earth, returning the hill as it had been, but now with a cave inside of it. As the summer faded, he cut meadow grasses and lined the little burrow with dry grass, just like a field mouse does. Finally, Ihia arranged the seashells so that his love could see them from overhead and return to him when the autumn returned once more. Now remember, this was an intelligent man, and he reasoned that what would keep a mouse warm in the winter might keep a star maiden cool in the summer. When the time came for the 7 sisters to come to once again depart, the youngest remained behind. But to keep from melting away, she had to stay on the ground in the dark. All right. Trying to get the rest of this stuff off of here. I hope you're enjoying the story so far. Yeah, you could do this with sandpaper too. Doesn't have to be Scotch-Brite. Doesn't have to be sand. There's no, I don't know. There probably is a wrong way, but there are so many right ways. I wouldn't worry over too much. As you go along, you're going to notice that the feel becomes smooth, and it'll start to be a little shiny as you remove the crud. This will be important in a minute. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's nice. Okay. I guess while I'm doing this, before I keep on with the story, I'm going to pause for a moment and mention something about natural materials, cooking, and survival whenever you're using things like the bottle gourd. See, the bottle gourd can be used to hold your water. It can also be used to cook in if you use the right kinds of stones. Now, the kind of stone that you use for your hearth is a stone without fissures in it, without pores or fissures. So you don't want porous rock for your hearth because that'll hold moisture. Whenever it gets hot, it's going to crack. Whenever it cracks, sometimes it can throw shards of stone outwards. Not good. So use good solid rock without pores or fissures for hearthstones. For your cooking, use granite or basalt. Now you can use granite or basalt stones, heat them up in your fire, and then use sticks to pick them up out of the fire. And whenever you've got your gourd or a bag or anything else that you're going to do your water boiling in, filled with water, you put the stones in, and the heat will transfer from the hot stone from the fire to the liquid in your gourd, which will bring the liquid up to the boiling point, and you can have your your food cooked inside of a container just like this once it's prepared. Stew, anything you want, just using the hot rocks. So in case something happens and you can't get cooking utensils, bottle gourds, Laganaria cicereria, provide you with something that you can cook out of. All right. But remember, basalt and granite. Don't use flint. Flint would be bad. Flint would be very bad. Flint's fine for tool making. Speaking of, where did I put the awl? I have an awl around here somewhere. There it is. All right. So if we were going to be doing this without steel, this particular tool would probably be a stick with a little chip of flint at the tip of it that we attach with twine and hide glue. So what we're going to do with this is attempt to open up the top of this bottle gourd. Now, I don't know how I want to do it. Do I want to make like a lift up the top lid, perhaps? Do I want to just take this top off and just leave it open? I could make a bowl out of it. I could process it and actually use it to make a birdhouse, I suppose. That would be a possibility. I think I want to try to make a top with a lid. And to do that, I'm going to make a line all the way across here and just lift the first half of this off. And then we'll process it further from there. All right. Let's see. All right, where was I? Our star-crossed lovers found more woes, for Aegea's embrace continued to melt the maiden, and she was obliged to spend her nights alone in the dark. All of her life she had known only the company of other stars, and she felt so alone. She cried, and those salty tears flowed down between the layers of straw, making them freeze over once again. During the hot summer months, she cried a lot. If you ever spent winter far enough north, you may have heard the sound of ice crying. It can be quite unsettling on a cold, dark night. Some say the Great Spirit heard the crying and came to have a look. "You're a sky spirit," said the Great Spirit. "You cannot go on existing like this." Now, here's the point where the stories diverge. And some say that the Great Spirit transformed the seventh sister into a human woman so that she could properly marry the man that she loved. And others saying that the giant heard the weeping and uncovered her hiding place. Now, in this version, the giant declared that she will now suffer the cold that the sky people bring with them when they rest here, hiding from me. That's what he says. And so, no matter which version of the tale that you've heard, they all kind of converge back at the wedding of Aegea and the Star Maiden. Of course, there'd be dancing, and that brought the first concern for the upcoming nuptials. It had been decided that with a wedding of such importance, all the humans should be allowed to attend. But the terrible force of the sisters dancing had everyone terrified. The Great Spirit intervened, and because remember, whenever they dance across the landscape, they cover it with snow and ice, and snowstorms and ice storms, especially here in the American South, can be devastating, as some of you have firsthand experience of. So the Great Spirit intervened and bestowed his gift upon the newlywed couple. He dug a hole between a hazelnut tree and a castor bean bush, and he planted a seed. Now, if you know the nature of seeds and vines and trees, I'm going to diverge from the story as written for a moment and talk about that. Well, you know that whenever you've got a seed, and you take the seed and you plant it in the ground, you nurture it, you protect it, you water it, as long as it's the appropriate climate and soil is fertile, then it'll grow and it'll produce a vine, or it'll produce a tree if it's a tree seed. And in time, it'll mature and it'll produce the fruit that's appropriate for that tree. And inside that fruit, there'll be the seed. And the seed, if you take it, can reproduce the same vine or the same tree. Well, close enough to it. Minor variations because of genetic drift. But you'll get the same kind of produce. You plant a bottle gourd, you're going to get bottle gourds. If you plant a hazelnut, you're going to get hazelnuts. All right. So he dug the hole between the hazelnut and the castor bean bush, and he planted a seed. A vining plant grew up from that place, and it had beautiful white flowers, just like the feathers in the maiden's cloak. In time, the gourd grew to be big enough for all the people of the world to make a hole in and walk inside. safe from the storms that came with the sister stands. All right, now I'm going to take a moment here and see if I can get a line etched right here. There we go. And all I'm going to do is just press the awl in a little bit to pierce, there we go, that outer rind of the bottle gourd. Just push it in, pull it out, push it in, pull it out, push it in, pull it out, push it in, pull it out. Enough. This could be boring. And I have to look down here at what I'm doing, and I can't look up there and read. So yeah. This may take me a minute. How are you guys doing out there? Vicky tells me that the sisters have visited her so far this winter, and they have left lots of snow and ice. How about everybody else? Hi, Katie. Oh, thank you so much. And Brian, thank you again. Yeah, this is an amalgamation of different stories. It's not for one particular tribe or one particular continent. Some of it's Australian, some of it's North American, and it comes from all over the place. Brian saying, "Can you screw a locking suck thing lid on that?" Well, I've got something I'm going to put on here. I do. Let me back up, see how everybody's doing. Brian said, "You see here my deck crack when it's minus 18." Yeah, it gets cold. It gets so cold. Yeah, Brian knows about ice singing and ice crying. Yep. Yeah, growing up in Minnesota. Yeah, it gone from cold to cold when the snow didn't stop crunching and it starts squeaking. Sounds kind of like you're walking on perlite, right? Like, what is this? This is not normal. I'll tell you what, this might go a little bit faster if might go a little bit faster if I use a knife and get it out of the line of sight there. Vicky is saying basalt and granite are igneous rocks. Yes, it's true. Salt and granite are igneous rocks, and they're very good for this purpose. All right, I forgot an important step. I've got everything sanded off, so I don't have a whole lot of excess stuff here. But I forgot an important step, and I'm going to have to do that sooner rather than later. And it's the reason why I sent the kitty cats outside, because I didn't want them to see this part. You can do this a bunch of different ways. There's fluff on my floor. You can do this a bunch of different ways. You can do it with your campfire, but I'm going to do it with a propane torch. And that's, of course, going to be singeing the outside of this bottle gourd. Now that I've got it sanded off, we're going to singe the outside of it. And singeing the outside of it is going to slightly char this surface. And when the surface becomes slightly charred, it's going to resist rotting from here on out. That's the hope. So give me a second here. I'm going to go grab my propane torch, which I put on the far side of the stove. I thought I was going to have the camera oriented that way, and it's not. So give me just 1 second. I'll be right back. That's right. That's right. We're going to play with fire. We're going to play with fire tonight. Oh. All right. They say we're iced in for a few days, or were, yeah. Melted enough now you can get out. Well, that's good. Whenever you're living in the hills, you just have to have your supplies laid in and be ready to wait until you can get out again. Especially if you wind up with the deep drifts. All right. Wish us luck. We're going to take this. Oh, incidentally, you can tell your bottle gourds are ready whenever you shake them, and you can hear the seeds rattling around on the inside. All right. So before we get too much further down here, we're going to go ahead and singe this thing. All right. All right. Now, you don't want it to burn. You just want it to get a little brown. First time around, just a little brown. Don't burn it. If you're doing this on the fire, you want to wait until you've got your fire burned down, you've got coals going, and then you'll put it down on the coals and just rotate it on the coals, pull it up and away. Don't let it catch on fire. If it catches on fire, it's going to be a little bit harder to deal with. Also, if you have holes in the gourd, they're probably going to wind up being a place where you'll have fire. That may give you a couple. Oopsie, there's a little bit of stuff I didn't get sanded off there. All right. So you roll it around the coals. We're just going to char it a little bit. A little bit charred. Whoop, smoke. Don't want it to catch fire. Just char a little bit, char a little bit. Mm-hmm. Good, good, good. All right, starting to get a little charred. Don't leave that flame on it too long. There we go. There we go. All right, I'll give that a moment. Let this cool off for a bit. Now, as you start to char, you're going to notice that it's going to take on a sort of a mottled appearance on the outside, and that's kind of cool. You're going to get different patterns on the outside there. Now, you can also do fun things like go ahead and prepare these ahead of time with a solution of ashes from your fireplace, a little bit of water. That's an alkaline solution. You get it really, really concentrated alkaline solution. You paint it whatever design that you want. And then whenever you get it on the fire and you start charring, that part that's treated with the alkaline solution after it's dried is going to char at a different temperature than everything else. And as a result, you wind up having a contrast and your pattern will pop out. It'll all be in that that charring and modeling on the outside, which is going to look really cool. This is just basic stuff. All right. So yeah, they use the same thing for treating wood in old Japanese cabinet making and stuff like that. You char the wood and it prevents the decay. Yep. All right. Oh, Sean says you better not be anywhere near California with that. Oh my goodness, yeah. Tell you what, that's a mess and a half out there. Just people running around being completely and totally irresponsible all over the place. All right, so I wanted this to cool off a little bit so I can hold it from this side while I get the top, which I probably should have done before I started cutting, because that's going to be a spot that might burn a little bit. All right. There we go. How come Tulsa Fox hasn't charred her husband's head yet? Charcoal can absorb an amazing amount of nutrients, which can provide fertility for centuries. Well, I mean, the charcoal has lots of surface area, and the surface area allows it to be a home for bacteria, and they just keep on keeping on as long as there's the opportunity for them to rehydrate and recharge that reservoir. Unless the bacterial life dies off entirely, that charcoal will keep them living indefinitely. Not the same bacteria. The bacteria themselves aren't immortal, but the colony goes on forever. Fire, guys! We're gonna play with fire. We have fire. Trying not to burn. Trying not to burn. Oh, try not to burn. Try not to burn. Try not to burn my gourd. Try not to burn. Try not to burn. Try not to burn my gourd. Oh, I got a gourd. Then try not to burn it. Gonna try not to burn my gourd. All right. Whoop. That caught on fire for a second there. There we go. I get that neck there. I'm gonna try to get the neck without getting my fingers. Ooh. We don't want it too brown. It caught on fire, smoldering a little bit. That's okay. Woo, that's hot. We'll give that a minute. We'll give that a quick minute. Boy. There we go. Normally, I thought it was customary for the wife to char the head of her husband's gourd. I don't know. All right. So I'm going to wipe off some of that extra charring with the paper towel. I think we'll sand it down a little bit more too. But some of the stuff that we're burning off is going to be a little bit of that dead outer skin. And we really want to get the hard part underneath to get a little bit of a char on it. It doesn't have to be a deep char, but just enough that it's going to be acting as a retardant to decay. There was another version of this story that I was thinking about telling. It involved Coyote the trickster, and the rabbit people. But I'm not sure I like that version yet. All right. Number 7 is significant culturally. Of course, it's significant for the Chalagi. It's significant for a whole bunch of other people too. And it has its roots in mystic tradition with the 7 chakras of the human body running from the crown of the head down to the coccyx, the energetic centers. That's what all the mystical fussing was about. Once upon a time, people tried to hide that stuff and keep it away from the common folk, because if they could keep it away from the common folk, they could have their little secrets and nobody would know. Well, now everybody knows. All right, here we go. So now we've got our bottle of gourd. It's looking kind of like this. There we go. We started out with it looks like it might make a nice shaker. We started out looking about that color, and now we're getting darker. All right. I think I'm gonna hit it one more time though. One more time here. Ryan says a canteen is useful. No, yeah, you can use these for canteens. Uh-oh. All right. Here we go. Oh yeah, there we go. Want it brown but not black. Because whenever I sand it down, if it gets black, that means whenever I sand it down, I'm going to be scraping bits off, and it's going to be exposing the softer material on the inside. I don't want to compromise the shell on the outside by burning. I just want to char. There we go. Okay. Breaking time again. Let it cool off a moment here. Let it cool off, and we're going to get back to. Oh my goodness, John. Get back to the story. Oh, all right. Now, as you recall, no matter which version of the story we're in, it all comes back to the wedding. All right. Let me scroll down here. Now, this would not be a good story unless the trickster made an appearance, and so he does. Placing some kind of a pithy film inside of the gourd, so that as soon as all the people walked inside, they became stuck fast. So they had the sticky pith that he put inside the gourd. Now, at this moment, the sisters arrived, and they've brought their shells with them. And this is where I think the mounds of shells version early in the story makes more sense, because a gourd large enough to hold all of humanity would have to be very, very large indeed. So the sisters dumped their shells out on the ground, and they began to dance. And as they danced, they whipped those shells about, and they scraped and abraded away all the pith on the inside of the gourd. The shells, amazingly, did not harm the people, just cleaned them all off, so that when everyone emerged, the bits of old pith just fell away like dust in the breeze. So we're going to do that here in just a moment after I get done with this, with the charring, which I may be done with, actually. I may be done with that. It looks kind of all right, actually. I don't want it to be incredibly dark, so I think we're going to be good with just that way. All right, give me a minute, and I'm going to try to get the lid off as gently as possible. You may not be able to see what I'm doing here for a moment, so bear with me. All I'm doing is taking my knife and trying to cut a straight line in the bottle gourd, which may be more or less difficult. Let's see if I can hold this here someplace where it won't wobble. There we go. Okay. Now, if we're lucky, we can get this lid to come off fairly clean. If not, it's going to crack and make a mess. So why you want to go around with an awl whenever you're starting out. You don't just want to jam your knife in and go for it. It may crack. But if you've created an etch with a punch or an awl before you get started, then whenever it does finally split, it should split. And see, here's cracking. It should split along the lines that you established, hopefully. Hopefully, he says. Crack. As long as it cracks along the line that I'm making for it, it'll be fine. I want to. Oh. Nope. This happens sometimes. This is one of the reasons why. Say, Brian was asking about if I could make a special lid for it. I was trying to get this entire thing to come off, and if I get this entire thing to come off in one piece, then I have a shot at doing it. Otherwise, no. We're just going to have to make a regular pot. Now, if you can get the entire top to come off, then you can make a loop with leather like that and glue it on the inside. And then when you bring the two halves together, you make a lid that will close. But this one, apparently, it's not going to cooperate with me. We've got a crack that just opened up right along there. So we will have to forego a fancy lid on this piece and just make do with what we got. There's the top. Here's an example of the pith that was on the inside. There you go. So if we're going to do it that way, I think we'll want to just cut like this. There we go. Of course, some people say that the reason why the seventh star in the Pleiades system is no longer visible is because the Earth is tilted ever so slightly on its axis from the days long ago. And nowadays, that particular star is low on the horizon. And about the only time you can ever see it is if you just happen to have a solar eclipse at around that particular time of the year. And then because the sunlight on the horizon in the evening is not blocking your view, then you can see the seventh star in the Pleiades system. But that's just a boring way to put it. The stories of magical giants and star maidens and weddings and things like that, that's a lot more exciting. Meanwhile, we're learning how to do fun things like pick out stones to use in the hearth and pick out stones to use in cooking and pick out the materials that we need to build waterproof and insulated spaces, whether that's an ice house or maybe a dwelling for people. There we go. It's supposed to come off more like that. And now we can have access to the inside there. So this one's just going to be a regular bowl, I think, without a fancy top. All right. Well, for starters, we've got all of these seeds inside. Like I said, whenever the dance was done, all the people came out, but they were perfectly fine. They just knocked all the pith off of them. Now, here we go. There's, well, go ahead and empty out as much of these as we can. If you're interested in having bottle gourd seeds, well, every one of these bottle gourds produces a whole bunch of seeds. I mean, a whole bunch of them. So we have plenty. Go ahead and head on over to greencountryagroforestry.com. I believe they come in like packs of 24. If you get 24 of these seeds, just about every one of them is going to germinate, grow into a bottle gourd. You'll have more bottle gourds and you'll know what to do with it. And then the next year, you'll have even more bottle gourds. Then you know what to do with it. Hear them dancing around in there? All right. So there they are. Now, if you're using seashells, this is pretty cool because they kind of just scrape, right? And they do a pretty good job. But rocks will do a pretty good job too. You have to pick at it. And then after a while, dump them out. Let that dust fall out there. Still got more pith in here. You see all that fluff. And then we have a whole bunch of seeds. Looking at them like I've never seen them before. All right. We're not done with this story yet. This is why I like shells instead of rocks. Well, I just proceeded to put a hole in the side of this bottle of gourd. We got most of the pulp out, but we put a hole in it. Oh my goodness! I'm being horrible at giving you guys a good example today. This does happen sometimes. Yes, it does. Well, how do we want to proceed? Do we want to just keep on going as if I had not busted a hole in the side of this gourd and show you the rest of the process? I guess that's what we're going to do. So if you have not managed to break your gourd like I just did, you may now proceed on with the rest of the operation. You've charred the outside, you scraped the inside, gotten the pulp out. I may have done this a few times before. I should warn you, occasionally you lose one. All right. Let me see. So before taking their leave, the 6 remaining Star sisters each left behind a gift for the newlywed couple. And, you know, you could say they may have left it behind in little vessels like this, but yeah. They left corn, beans, squash, sunflowers, sunchokes, that's the Jerusalem artichoke, and ground cherries, or the husk cherry. So these are the traditional foods that the North American woodland tribesfolk relied upon. You know what? I have glue. I have glue, and I have ambition, and I can fix this. Yes. I'm going to fix this with glue and ambition. You just stand by. All right. So those particular crops are things that you can always rely upon when you're in North America for survival, for storing your harvest. They require no refrigeration. They require very minimal preparation to keep safe from pests throughout the winter months. So these are things that you can rely upon. You can also rely upon the game and your perennials, your trees, your pecans, your hickories, hazelnuts, of course, we mentioned before. And there's going to be another helper that we'll bring out here in just a moment. We'll get to that here in just a minute. So where are we at? Ground cherries. Now, yes. I'd love to tell you that the married couple lived happily ever after, but you know, this is not a European folk story. This is a different kind of story. And as you know, in the real kind of story, nobody ever really lives happily ever after. There's always challenges. So this is the time before the creatures of the earth had met in council to voice their concerns about man, before Bear had tried to make a bow, and before the Great Spirit had gifted mankind with Atsina, the sacred cedar. The vine borer moth heard about the wedding and decided to interfere. So this is before that time that man learned how to deal with pests the other way. The vine borer moth heard about the wedding and decided to interfere because he was afraid of how powerful humans would become now that they had the alliance with the people from the sky. Now, if I had hide glue, I'd be using hide glue, but I don't have any hide glue. I'm just going to use this crummy white stuff. I hope you all don't mind. It's not traditional. You can also use pine pitch. Pine pitch is good. Use pine pitch, heat it up, and seal things together. Kind of like a hot glue. Your old school, back old country hot glue. There we go. There we go. All right. Now I'm just going to glue this back in place. Now, because we cracked this, it's not going to be useful for it's not going to be useful for holding water, unless you seal it with pitch. But then you probably wouldn't want to use it to drink out of. So this is just going to be a container for holding seeds in, which is perfectly good use for containers of this sort. Let me get a little bit of this glue on here. my nail. I broke my gourd. Busted my gourd. Why, by golly, isn't that the story of my life? Busted my gourd. Mary was watching this fellow by the name of Danny Jones. You guys may have heard of him. He has a sort of an esoteric sort of podcast. It's unusual guests on, and he had some fellow on who was supposed to know things about psyops. He was mentioning having had an experience that he said was a frontal lobe seizure. It actually sounds a little bit like what happened to me in June. If you remember, I kind of got a little strange. It was either that or meditation psychosis. I'm not really sure which one, but either way, it was an interesting couple of months, June into July. I kind of overlooked the fact that I'd gotten a year older. My 53rd birthday came and went, and I didn't really notice. All right. Whew. That's rough. That's rough. There's still a pretty big crack there. But we'll see if we can fix a busted gourd. There we go. Just put that in there. We'll hold this together for a minute and see if we can get it set. All right. Now, chances are, if you've been walking along in a vegetable garden during the day, getting back to the story, you've seen vine borer moth. She's colored orange and black, and she's out during the daytime. She's one of the few moths that are active in the day. It's her habit to lay her eggs on the vines of squash and gourd plants near the base of the plant as possible. When the eggs hatch, the larvae eat their way through the vine, killing the plant. Now, she was on her way to the wedding celebration to do just that, but she couldn't find the huge gourd that the Great Spirit had planted. Her keen sense of smell could locate a squash vine for 2 days' walk in any direction, but she couldn't smell this vine. She tried looking for the gourd. Her eyesight isn't very good, but she can find the yellow of a squash bloom from a long distance away. But still, she saw no yellow blooms. And it being daytime, the white blooms of the great gourd were closed. Now, a great war was coming between the humans and the insects, and it's one that would involve all of the other animals as well. But that's a story for another time. For now, I just want to take notice that vine borer moth acted out of ignorance and fear, and be careful to not be guilty of the same sort of error. Vine borer has a real purpose, and it's a valuable one too. Imagine for a moment all of these long, strong vines that come on the cucurbits, the summer squashes, the winter squashes, pumpkins, vines, and gourds. They grow these long, strong vines with little tendrils that let them grab onto anything. And if it's not strong enough to hold their weight, they'll drag it down to the ground where the broad leaves hide everything from the sun. Now, if you leave these sort of plants unchecked, they can take over huge areas. And I actually had this happen a year or so ago with some Seminole pumpkin when I said, wow, these things are maybe a little too abundant. There's such a thing as too much of a good thing, right? So vine borer does a service to everyone, because whenever she comes and she lays her eggs on these sorts of squash plants, she stops them from taking over the world. So she's doing a service in nature by serving as a check and a feedback loop to prevent the overpopulation of one particular species. In this particular case, it's squashes, which may be wonderful for us as a food source, but maybe not so wonderful for everything else because of that growth habit they have. All right, here we go. As far as the star maiden and the human goes, well, they lived happily together for many years, and they had many, many children. And their children grew up learning how to grow the small white bulbs that were the alliums to plant in their gardens. And let's see. And they learn to plant their garlic when the sisters appear in the sky every year. So whenever the Pleiades appear in the sky, running away from the giant, when they show up, that's about the time. It's in the late summer. that's about the time that you need to start putting your garlic in the ground. So that's your timer for that. All right. So they also knew how to grow corn, beans, and squash, sunflowers that they made the seeds for, both that are both for men and birds. And let's see, what else do they have? Um, Oh, and the sunflowers to make the edible tubers. That's the Jerusalem artichokes. They learned how to grow the ground cherries, and all of these things still grow in the remaining woodlands along the coast where the people once lived. And the shell mounds are there too. And some of them are big enough to be seen from far, far away, even from up above. Now, eventually, Ahia grew old and he died. And after a long time, it was thought that the Star Maiden had also passed away until some men built a machine that allows them to see the stars better. And now we know that she didn't die, but she returned to the sky to be with her people. But since the giant is still chasing the seven sisters, she just hides among the hilltops and the mountains. And that's where you need to be in order to see her today, even with one of those machines. Now, a long time has passed, and eventually the children of Ahia and the Star Maiden had to move to a new place where the land was strange, that would be here, and the familiar plants struggled to grow. The situation was not hopeless, because although it may have seemed at first, or as it may have seemed at first, just as the sisters leave the sky every year right around the 15th of April, most danger of frost will have also passed, if you're here, that is, and it's a good time for planting corn. And the children of Ahia still keep the river cane and grow the alliums, the corn, the beans, the squash, the sunflowers, and ground cherries or tomatillas if they happen to be in the southwest where they can, cherry tomatoes and other tomatoes where they can't. And there never was another great gourd like the one that had been planted for the wedding. But the children of Ahia took the seeds from those too, and those gourds still provide protection for the harvest once they've been properly prepared, as we've been trying to do a little bit inexpertly here today. And of course, after they've been treated this way, they will not decay. And to keep the rodents from attacking the stores from within, as long as they're properly kept. Now, to keep the rodents from attacking, we take the castor bean. Remember, we mentioned the castor bean earlier. And the castor bean, whenever you harvest them, you can smash them into a pulp and put them inside your gourd with a bit of water and with a hot stone, basalt or granite, bring it to a boil, and then skim the oil off the top and discard the rest. Now, the oil part is non-toxic, but there is a toxin that's found in the water-soluble portions of the gourd. So use only the oil and only on the outside. But as it happens, if you have a supply of castor bean oil, as this is, you can start working it. Let me get a bit more on my towel with a piece of rabbit pelt, perhaps, if you don't have paper towels. But you can start working it into the surface of your gourd, which will also help keep out the water after you've charred it. So you have oil treatment and charring, which both preserve. Incidentally, you probably want to do this a little bit earlier in the year than now. The drier they get, the more brittle they are. Whenever they're almost completely dry, they won't crack as easily. But that's what I get for waiting until the middle of the winter to get busy on this particular chore. So the castor bean oil is going to help prevent water infiltration from the outside, but it's also got another property in that your rodents, whenever they smell that, it gives them a kind of a shortness of breath, makes them feel like they're going to suffocate. They don't like the sensation and they run away from it. You can also use clay that you've impregnated with the oil from the castor bean and put it down into your molehills and gopher holes, and that will also help deter them. Mint will help deter them if you grow mint. Rodents don't like mint. They don't like mint, and they don't like the smell of castor oil. So once you've got this treated this way, you can put your corn on the inside of it. And even if there are rats around, they should leave your corn alone. At least for a while. At least for a while. I have heard stories of caches of old seeds found in preserved bottle gourds that were just ancient, and the rats never came for them. So there you go. I'm going to have to apply a little bit more glue on the inside, I think. There we go. After you've rubbed it in, you set it on the shelf and let it dry. After it's dried a bit, give it another layer. And there you've got a bottle gourd treated, so you can keep your seeds or other goodies inside. And my fingers are now all oily. All right. Let me see here. All right, so yeah, we covered all that stuff. The way I wrote the story was I was not planning on showing the preservation whenever I wrote it. I was doing something else. But we'll come back and do it later. Well, now it's later, so we get to see what that looks like. So there we go. Utensils that you can grow on vines. Isn't that cool? All right. Brian's taken off. Yep. Yeah, ricin is in the water-soluble part. Great. Back to BSA nerd stuff, which is nice. Brian says I need to use a hacksaw blade. Yeah, that would help. Vicky's saying, I know that the squash seeds are edible. What about the gourd seeds? The gourd seeds are, well, they're not exactly edible, but you can use your oil press to press an edible oil out of them. So they're I don't think you'd want to eat the seeds, but you can get the oil out, and the oil is non-toxic. Yeah, Hans Christian Andersen and the Brothers Grimm are not known for happily ever after. That's Walt Disney specialties. Yeah. And of course, yeah, some seeds discovered in gourds in the Southwest and archaeological sites have still been viable. There were the ones that are called Anasazi beans now, or the red and white cattle bean is one of those that they found down there, and nobody knows exactly how old those things were. They could have been anywhere from a couple 100 years old. Well, they could have been 50 or 60 years old too. Somebody may have been there recently. But from some of the stories that we've heard, the caches that were along the rivers where you only had like a little granary and a little tiny space and not evidence that people were living there a long time. And it was like, why do we keep having these little tiny, like little outposts there? One of the stories that came from the Aztecs was that as they were going through the migrations, it became necessary for them to abandon their elderly from time to time because they couldn't keep up. And so they would leave a cache of food behind for them, and they would stay there until their time came. And that was how they lived out the rest of the days. And so that explained why you had these little tiny, just a little house for like one or two people, and then a large granary with capacity for a lot of food. That's because that's what they were doing whenever they had to leave their elderly behind on their migration. They left a lot of food for them, but they would let them behind, and that was the way that they traveled across the Southwest until they finally came to Mexico, and established a settlement around Mexico City. So a lot of those quote Anasazi structures, the little cliff shelters that are just up underneath. Ooh, somebody's walking around. Somebody walking around out in my yard. I see light inside. Boy, I see light inside. Give me a second. Boy, no. Okay. Never mind. That's not outside. It was on the bike path. Jeez. So I had a really bright light over there on the bike path. And they went by, and I was like, wait, somebody's walking in the yard. No, they weren't. They were on the bike path over there. Anyway, so whenever you see those little tiny little cliff houses in the American Southwest, and it looks like Anasazi, but you don't really see evidence of long-term settlement in that area. That explains what it was. It was the early Aztecs on their migrations, and that's what they had done. That's why you see these little spots. You're like, what? Why so much storage capacity for such a small residential space, right? That's why. That's what they left. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's been almost an hour. Almost an hour. So, what do you think? Did you like the story? Was it a good story? Was the story better than the demonstration? Yeah, a hacksaw blade would be a lot better. And then doing these a little bit earlier than I did it is a little bit better. This is one of the reasons why, guys. Even though I've done this at least twice before, this time around I wound up destroying the gourd that I was working on. Just because you've done it once or twice doesn't mean you're going to get it perfect every time. And if you're having to develop the skill, you may want to start working on it before it becomes a necessity. Just saying. In any case, thank you all so much for joining me tonight. I hope you found tonight's video informative or entertaining. If you had, or if you did, you know what to do. I'll catch you next time. Until then, get out there and get growing.